Hi, it's Mark Yankovic from Deltsico in my Collaborate to Zero series, where I am talking to inspiring people and getting them to share ideas. Today we have the incredible Dame Polly Courtice, who will be joining me, who is the founding director of the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership, who has done the most amazing work driving sustainability, driving change amongst leaders for over 30 years.
Hello. Hi.
There you are. Hello, Polly. You're the third in the pillars of interviews that I'm doing in education. I did Richard Dunn, who was a primary school teacher. Yesterday, Claire Munn, who is the founder of Box Media and is an ed tech business, and then you kind of capping it off at university and postgraduate studies, and have been major influences through many people's lives for many years. So, as you know, lots of questions, so we'll try and get through them as fast as we can. But so I think that going right back to the beginning, starting CISL 30 years ago must have been unbelievably daunting, and there must have been so many people that said, this is just, this is a strange subject and a strange topic, and so what was the inspiration to start it, and how did you start it, and what were the challenges?
Well, I have to be honest, I didn't start 30 years ago with the intent of setting up an Institute for Sustainability Leadership. In fact, the term sustainability was barely used in 32 years ago as it is now. I joined the university to try and create a bridge, if you like, between the academic world, the academic knowledge available in Cambridge, and business and industry. And in fact, when I first joined, I think the university thought that I would be focusing mainly on high tech, science and technology, trying to get some of the university's knowledge out into practice. But very, very quickly, what I discovered when I went out to meet business leaders all around the UK initially was that they knew how to access the best knowledge available to the university in high tech, science and technology, but they were really struggling with this, what was then a kind of an emerging phenomenon of not knowing how to respond to some of the big global challenges that they were having to grapple with, both social and environmental. It was at a time when there had been a series of catastrophic environmental disasters like Bhopal and 3 Mile Island, and endless streams of environmental disasters, many of which directly involved the corporate world. And they were also struggling with human rights issues, big human rights issues, across a whole range of areas, and simply didn't know how to deal with them. And so it seemed to me that we could provide a better service drawing on the university's knowledge and thinking and expertise across a much broader range if we focused on that. So that was sort of really how we shifted from what I was asked to do to what we've landed up doing now more formally as sustainability. Roughly about the same time, all around the first Earth Summit, the Prince of Wales also recognized that companies needed help with these big issues, and he asked me to set up a summer school for business leaders, which then went on to be our flagship program, the Business and Sustainability Program, the Prince of Wales's program. So it's kind of evolved from there, and it's kind of grown with the sustainability agenda. We were very lucky to be in on the ground very, very early on, and to kind of grow with the movement, and to help people contribute to it from a policy, business and finance perspective.
It sounds like there were a couple of natural disasters which kind of helped, and it sounds like the university was incredibly forward thinking when they were already thinking ahead of, we have this incredible academic base, we know that industry needs help, how do we bridge that? And you had the disasters, and they allowed you to create that bridge.
Yeah, I mean, I think the university wanted to be part of the movement of getting knowledge from university into industry. To be absolutely honest, they didn't one of the most amazing things about Cambridge is they leave you alone once you've got the job. So nobody asked me to set it up in sustainability. And I didn't ask permission. We just did it. And I think by the time the university realized what we had grown, they were immensely proud. And I'm not taking away the credit from the university, but it isn't the kind of place where they start out one day and say, let's set up a sustainability institute. People do what they see needs to be done, and they give you the kind of freedom to do it. But then you have to make it work kind of without expecting too much help either. So we never had a bean from the university in terms of growing the institute. No research funding, no. Yeah. So it's one of those interesting things where things happen in Cambridge almost by accident, which makes it such an incredible place to be.
Well, it sounds very entrepreneurial. So they give you the space, and you just have to go out and make it happen.
Yeah, but if you get it wrong, you're dead. I mean, just to be absolutely clear, you can't do anything in this place that would damage the brand. They don't call it that. They call it, intellectual rigor and all those kind of things. But I knew from the very beginning that you have to be world class or die.
So one of the questions I've got, which is, and it sounds like you're answering it, and I think it links to Cambridge Zero, which is universities pride themselves on their academic output, not necessarily the functional element of it. So it's how many papers they write and how many PhDs they've got, and that seems to me, with all of the academics that we speak to, that's a really important mark. Yet we desperately need people to actually get out and do it. And it seems that what you've done with CISL is link that together. And are you seeing that with Cambridge Zero? Are you seeing that all of the different departments are genuinely trying to be more functional in fixing this problem?
Yes, I mean, I think we know now that as everybody talks about this decade of action, and just as elsewhere in the world, I think Cambridge is intensely focused on what it can do to drive change. And Cambridge Zero has been a really important initiative which brings together ideas right the way across the university to provide a very multidisciplinary approach to put recommendations to policymakers and industry. And CISL, my institute, has been part of that, but they're drawing on a very, very broad range. They've just published a really interesting report on a blueprint for a green future, which is trying to pull together some of the best thinking in Cambridge on how you can drive change in real practical terms. They also have doing a terrific amount of work in bringing together a global alliance of universities on climate, trying to use the university's convening power to bring other universities to form a kind of concerted view as to what we need to do. So yes, I think that Cambridge in some sort of strange way has always been not just theoretical, but intensely practical, very, very entrepreneurial. If you look at the Cambridge network and the whole ring of companies around Cambridge, many of them spin out companies from academics. So it looks sort of ivory towerish, but actually it's hugely entrepreneurial. But the real issue, the complaint that goes with that is that nobody's in charge. So it's one of those things where but that's how you have to create an entrepreneurial culture, is not to be too constraining, from which I benefited enormously.
Yeah, coming from being in an entrepreneurial environment, you need freedom, you need flexibility, you need to be able to be creative, but you need the fuel to go into that. And I think one of the challenges around education is that there is this incredible database and incredible skill set, but it's not necessarily available to everybody. And it's how do we slightly democratize or allow people who really care and want to tap into it, get access to it, and that feels like it's a well, certainly from an entrepreneurial perspective, I'm constantly grappling to go, who can I talk to? Who knows the answer to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting challenge, because of course, if again, just taking Cambridge as one example, but of course you could look at any of the great universities right across this country and around the world. How do you get access to what they know? And the truth is they know far more than you ever need to know. So the onus is sometimes on the people who want to know to put some time into working out what is the real question they're trying to answer. And actually, one of the things I think CISL was very, very good at is sitting, our whole approach, because that's what we were there to do, was to sit with companies and start with where they are, try and understand what it is that they're trying to fix, or indeed what they need to fix without yet knowing it, and work out what's the big question that you must answer. Because if you know what question you want answering, you can get into the universities in a much, much better way. They don't know how to deal with people who just come in and say, what have you got? They say, what do you want? So it's a very, it's a two-way process. And I think organizations like CISL have really excelled, and Cambridge Zero now doing more of it, excelled at helping people to say, where are you? Where do you need to get to? And what are the issues that are where the answers are easily available if only you knew that you needed to answer them? And what are the really crunchy, interesting questions that we can solve together? Because of course, that's the other thing, is a very, very strong growing interest in how do you co-create the solutions to some of these problems? Because the world is moving so fast, changing so fast. You can't afford to give an academic X £1,000 and say, come back in 3 years with the answer. It just doesn't work like that anymore. Of course, there are lots of academics who would love you to do that. But deep down, they know, we all know, that actually we need speed and scale right now as well. It's not instead of fundamental research, but we do need some answers now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great takeaway. Know the question. One of the learnings and one of the things that I tell a lot of people is know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's also very, very important. And I'm the first person to put my hand up and say, I haven't got a clue about most things, but I know I want to know. So I'm not sure I do know the questions that I want to ask. I know the direction I'm going in, and I know what I'm trying to get to, but to help me on those steps, that's quite hard. So
and that's right, you do, and you do need to know, you do often need help in working out what's the question. And there are plenty of organizations, consultancies, NGOs, places like universities that have realized that and are trying to create that relationship with industry, business and industry, that wasn't always there.
Yeah, and that's the whole the collaboration pieces. The more we can come together and the more we can sit there and go, okay, I'm doing this, I want to move faster. How do I pair up and move faster? And you guys have a wealth of experience. I mean, the blueprint to a green future, is that a public document? Is that something that anybody can access?
Yeah, it's just been published. It's on the Cambridge Zero website. And I can send you the link afterwards. But that is a really interesting series of chapters from different aspects in terms of science, technology, policy. Very interesting chapter on just transition. How do you actually make this transition to a zero carbon world in a way that's socially fair and just? Very, very big issue, and many people are struggling with it, because we know we're not going to solve these problems unless we bring people who've traditionally tended to be rather ignored, unless we bring them with us. They are part of the solution, so they actually have to be incorporated into our thinking and planning.
Absolutely. I mean, and the concerns I have, in that document and all of the advice that you're giving, and you are, I mean, the university is connected to absolutely everybody. Do you see a genuine shift? Do you think that government have actually got this? Do you think that they are really pushing hard at this, or is this something that they're still trying to grapple with? Because they don't seem to be spending a lot of money in this space right now.
Well, I suppose you could look at that at two levels. You could look at it nationally and you could look at it internationally. I mean, we saw at Paris that every government just about in the world signed up to the Paris Agreement. I think the acknowledgement there was that we have a problem, and it's a problem of this generation. I mean, when I first started, they were kicking the can down the road to the 2080s. I think it's absolutely clear that we have 1 decade in which to make a massive difference. So I don't think I don't think people have failed to appreciate the problem, but I think where we are now is actually implementing the ambition. The UK government has the most phenomenal ambitions to get to net zero. Really, really impressive. Probably some of them amongst the most ambitious targets in the world. But actually, they don't have the policies to back it up. The policies are not yet in place that are going to make it happen. And as you will know, in industry, you can only go so far without having a policy environment that makes it possible, encourages and conducive to drive change. So I think the big gap we have at the moment is getting enough practical policy and regulatory tools in place to make this, to make it happen in practice. So ambition, tick, implementation, cross. Not entirely, but worryingly so. And what we do between now and the COP in November will be crucial. And of course, what we come out from the conference in Glasgow will be equally crucial, both at a national and an international level. Lots of people are very anxious about whether we're going to go far and fast enough.
And what do you think we should be expecting to come out of COP, or what would you hope that we get out of COP? And they should be messaging it already, but what do you hope?
Well, I suppose I hope that the countries of the world will really consolidate the ambition that they set out in Paris and start to both make commitments behind which there is some real meaning, make commitments to which they can be held accountable, but importantly, put some finance, some capital behind some of these commitments that will really unlock progress. So there's only so, I mean, you know, the Glasgow is going to be full of the policymakers, but it's surrounded by civil society, by business, by all sorts of campaigning organizations, all urging them to make commitments that they will stick to, and over a time frame that's meaningful. And we shall see.
As you say, it's ambition. You need ambition, but you need policy, and having a commitment's great, but if you don't have a policy, it doesn't make any difference. And it's kind of sharing best practice and which governments have got great policies in place, and how do we get them to collaborate and get the interdepartments, procurement guys all coming together.
Yeah.
I don't. Well, are you seeing that? Do you think they've got it?
There's some very, very interesting work being done at the EU level, because of course what they're doing is having to present a regional policy, but then get it delivered on the ground at a national level. So what the EU is doing to try to get countries to pull together is in many ways showing how collaboration and cooperation could work. But they have their challenges too. They have economies within the European Union who are still very, very heavily dependent on effectively carbon-intensive energy and economic growth. So, yeah, there will be. I mean, the challenge is that we have. This isn't. Ultimately, this is non-negotiable. The only question is how soon will we do it? We've seen in the last 2 years alone the impact of our activities on climate instability. And it used to be that people sort of thought that was far away and poor people who couldn't protect themselves. It's right on our doorstep now, both in the United States, here, flooding, storms, droughts. I mean, we're going to have to do it sooner or later, and the sooner we do it, the less expensive it will be. And that's what I think governments realize. But some of these things are politically quite unpopular to implement, because there will be winners and losers. There's a petrol head just driven past my window here. So.
Racing through Cambridge, that's not very good. I mean, the one thing that I think is well, one thing we know that is needed is funding, and it's giving money to people who have the ambition, the desire, the will to make mistakes, and get hurt, but doing the right thing, going in the right direction. And I'm not. Are you seeing that there's an increased will in funding for organisations like yours, funding coming into, not BlackRock going, oh, guess what, I'm now allocating Z billion to ESG, because they won't touch any SMEs, and ultimately SMEs is where all the change happens.
So I think that obviously a whole range of different sources of funding. There is a fairly substantial body of philanthropic funding that is already being allocated to many of these causes. Much greater sums of funding being allocated in the United States than here in the UK. And I look at the Jeff Bezos Earth Fund, vast amounts of money that are available potentially on a philanthropic basis. But in reality, the funding that really counts is funding that is core and embedded within our economy, which is where capital is being driven in the right direction for the right reasons. And what lies behind that, I think, is the ability to judge risk and opportunity. Capital will always be hard to access unless you can reduce the risk, but there's plenty of capital available hunting for opportunities. There's tons of money out there, but the problem is how to de-risk it and how to pick the winners. So the investment opportunities are available. I think there's lots of money. We have an accelerator starting up at CISL, and we've got investors surrounding us wanting access to that pipeline of companies who are going to provide solutions to some of the problems that we face in a way that will be socially, economically, and environmentally acceptable. So I think there's money out there for the SMEs, and of course for the big companies that develop the right solutions.
Well, it's fascinating. It's fantastic that, and it's about time that some of the cash and pension fund money and future money comes to people like you and your accelerator, because you've got first-hand experience of who they are and know what good looks like. I'm conscious we're running out of time, and there's a couple more questions. So you've answered my COP question. It's a slightly tough one. Magic wand education. What would you love to see happen?
I suppose it depends on whether you education at a school level or at a university level. But if I were to just take both together, I would like to see these issues about how we as humans live on the planet not being something that you do in geography or something that you might do in some kind of marginal subjects, but to be fundamental to all the decisions that we take and to the subjects that we study, so that people are aware of the impact that we are having on the natural world and on one another, and that it's factored into how and why we teach every subject, that we don't sort of put some of these subjects in hermetically sealed boxes, but to see what they teach you and how you can respond to the challenges that we face in the world. I still see too often, and you and I have talked in the past about, well, whether we're teaching MBA students about sustainability. Well, it's getting a bit better, to be fair. I could give you some good examples, to be fair, but just to be thoroughly unfair, most of the MBAs that I've seen still have a sustainability module at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And it's an optional one at that. So I just think that, I think institutions, whether they're companies or academic institutions, should be embedding this thinking into their daily decision making. Every company should have at its core the sustainability principles, which after all, sustainability only means the capacity for continuance. So if you're not thinking about the capacity for continuance in the core of your business, you might be missing a trick. And the best companies that I'm seeing out there have now moved away from having a sustainability department over there and put it right at the heart of their strategy. Right at the heart of their strategy. And Unilever is an obvious example, but look at IKEA and Interface and Anglian Water, just to declare I'm on their board, so I would say that. But I do see these companies putting these social and environmental issues as part of their purpose, and then making that core to their mainstream strategy, not a nice to have optional extra. And that for me is the way we have to go, and we have to teach people at every level that that is fundamental to their future.
That's absolutely brilliant. I mean, the MBA students, and one of the things that I learned in my banking days was a statement which took me a while to get my head around, which was never let a crisis go underutilized.
Yeah,
and
never waste a good crisis.
This is a crisis, and if you're vaguely entrepreneurial or want to do an MBA and come out with a business, we're in a crisis. Opportunities are galore.
Yeah.
So never let them go underutilized. And the fact that it isn't even it's a second afterthought, I think is dreadful. Okay. So things to share with everybody: podcasts, books, things that you think people should be aware of that they aren't, that they can go away and look at.
There are loads of wonderful podcasts out there, but I came across one a little while ago, which I've been following ever since. It's called Outrage and Optimism. And it's a podcast that is produced by Christiana Figueres. If you remember, she was the executive secretary of the UNFCCC. She got the Paris Agreement over the line, not single-handedly. She was one of those people. So it's called Outrage and Optimism, and she works, I think, with Tom Rivett-Carnac and Paul Dickinson, and they have a wonderful series of interviews and commentary on solutions to climate change and how ideas as to how to reshape the world, they say, and everything from looking at the impacts of extreme weather events. But they had a wonderful interview with Ellen MacArthur on the circular economy, and they even had an interview with Ben van Buren, the chief executive of Shell, talking about the fact that the Netherlands had delivered that landmark ruling against them. So it's a really lots and lots of really highly topical and relevant topics. So that's just one. And actually, I think I think it's UCL has got a list of the 10 top podcasts for sustainability. It's either UCL or Imperial. No, I think certainly it's UCL. But if you just 10 top podcasts, I think they've got a good list. I've just finished reading an amazing book, which isn't. I suppose it's partly connected to sustainability. Well, it is deeply connected to sustainability, but it's written by a colleague of mine here at Cambridge, and it's called The Fight for Beauty. I was very moved by it. I read it actually a couple of months ago, but it talks about the history of Britain's belief in the importance of landscape beauty, and how the battles that have been waged over the years to either access or protect the landscape, and in the face of economic growth. It's just a really lovely book, and I think what it does is to just remind you of why landscape and beauty is just such a simple, and of course we've been reminded in recent 18 months or so, but it just really reminds us of how long we have as a society had this deep need for beauty in the environment. And I found that I suppose it resonated very much with what has been motivating me throughout my life.
That's absolutely brilliant. I will make sure that I download that book today. Sounds fantastic. Polly, thank you so much for your time, and apologies for the for using a system that is,
No, but now you see, I'll never fear it again. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. So and the inspiration and the leadership, and there's lots of other questions that I'd love to ask you about, but the takeaway of people have the ambition, but do they have the policy, or do they have the ability? And I think that's the most important thing, is we've got to bring everybody together, give them the ability, and then we can drive forward faster.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Mark. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, Polly.
Bye-bye.
Bye.